I'm Dave Henderson, if you can read the sign here. As Kay noted, I'm the outdoors columnist for the Ithaca Journal, and I have been for the last 27 years. I've been a newspaper columnist for 50 years. Everybody said, well, you're much too young for that, but no, that's the truth. Because I've been a freelancer for the last 30 years, and got out of the office and whatever, I've been able to have a second career as a freelance writer in magazines, and that I specialized in hunting and shooting. I've written 8 books on hunting and guns. I was the media liaison for the Olympics in Atlanta for the shooting sports, and I served as an expert witness in legal cases involving guns and hunting. I'm also a certified firearms instructor. Made a good deal of money giving seminars on hunting and shooting over the years, and at one time I was a Class A trap shooter. As a columnist, I'm allowed to inject some opinion into my pieces. That's a privilege that the everyday reporter does not have. My opinion, as you might imagine, has drawn responses and rebukes in this liberal area. Everything flows downhill from Cornell, I'll tell you that. I'm a life member of the NRA, but excuse me, don't march lockstep with its musings. In fact, I was fired from NRA publications in 2007 when a board member saw my Ithaca Journal column that he deemed offensive to the NRA, even though it didn't mention the NRA. It was offensive. As far as local shooting sports locally, there's about a dozen clubs, fishing game clubs, shooting sports clubs in Tompkins County, Schuyler, and on the fringes of Tioga and whatever. 99% of them specialize in trap shooting. And any trap shooting club is going to have skeet shooting also. A couple of them have pistol ranges. As far as getting instruction, it would be a matter of going to the club and looking up members and see. You won't get professional instruction. I don't know of anybody that gives professional instruction here, and there may be some, I don't know. I teach in the other side of Binghamton, in Kirkwood, and we get a ton of people coming from the Ithaca area to get pistol instruction. As far as, like I say, pistol shooting, sporting clays, trap, dozens and dozens. In New York, you can't handle, let alone use a pistol without a permit. It's a state permit, but it is administered at the county level. So every county is going to have different rules. Right? Now the permit's the same all over the state. Fill out an application, get vetted through a background check by the sheriff, excuse me, fingerprinted, very thorough, fingerprinted, and you have to have 4 references. If your background check turns out all right and the references sing your praises, you're going to get a permit. It's going to cost you $125, and you will only be able to use the gun that you put in that permit for hunting or shooting at a club. You cannot travel with that gun loaded. You can't have it in your car loaded. In fact, if it's in your car, it's got to be locked up and inaccessible in the trunk or something. Now, in many counties, not Tompkins, in many counties, you can apply for a carry permit, concealed carry permit. That allows you to have the gun in your car loaded on your person. If you get stopped, you are obligated to tell the police officer that you have a loaded gun and you have a permit. They don't want to hear that, I'll tell you right now. If you have a regular permit, you don't have the concealed carry permit, that gun, as I said before, has to be locked up, away from the ammunition, in your trunk. You can't have access to it. You're just basically transporting at that point. If you're using the gun for hunting, it's a little bit different, but you still can't have a loaded gun in the car. Shotgun, rifle, anything. All firearms purchases, whether they're long guns, shotguns, rifles, or pistols, require a background check, a federal background check. The dealer calls the FBI after you've filled out the application, whatever. The application is a 4473. It's a federal form. Ask you if you've ever been convicted of this, that, the other thing, if you've ever denounced your citizenship, if you're been treated as mentally deficient, if you are a fugitive from justice. Any of these questions, if you answer yes, you're automatically out. If you answer yes and still submit that, that's a felony. Very, very seldom is it adjudicated, but that is a felony. The NRA, by the way, wrote up these forms. They submitted them, lobbied for them 40 years ago. As I say, if you fail that background check, it's a felony. If you lie on it and get away with it, that's a felony, and that does get adjudicated, right? But that background check is limited by what the various states and armed forces submit to it, the information. There's a very, very big case in Binghamton in 2009 where a Vietnamese, well, he grew up in Vietnam. He was Korean, killed, I think, 19 people in downtown Binghamton at the American Civic Center. I sold him that gun. Okay, he passed the background check for 4 or 5 guns at the store I was working at. He passed, when you sell a pistol in New York, it's a process where more than one paper person is in the sales. Right? I happened to be the one that delivered it to him the day he came in. And he had 4 or 5 guns from us. Passed all the checks. And of course it was publicized very heavily that he came from Gander Mountain, but the gun that he used, one of the guns that he used. It turns out that his father had told Broome County in a letter when he was applying for a pistol permit, don't give it to my son. He's mentally incompetent. And it turns out later, when we find out after everybody's dead, that he'd gone to California and had been charged with domestic abuse, never reported. The FBI didn't know. Now, everybody got sued, right? Gander got sued, I got sued, everybody. And one of the private investigators for one of the families of the victims was a Marine vet that I know very well. Excuse me. He came to my house and we talked. He was interviewing me, of course, because he was working for the plaintiffs. And he told me just this past year that he had found out since that the killer had been arrested 3 days prior to the event, charged with domestic abuse. They hadn't taken his guns. Anyhow, that's where things fall through the crack, and that's one of the biggest problems we have, people getting guns. There is no permit requirement for rifles or shotguns. The AR-15, which has been called an assault rifle since '93, when Clinton put out the assault rifle ban. There are a dozen hunting guns on the market that are not prohibited. They do exactly the same things as the AR-15. The reason the AR-15 is prohibited and in New York is outlawed is because it looks just like the M16 assault rifle. The M16, anybody that served in the military from Vietnam on knows the M16 is a fully automatic or semi-automatic. It has a select fire switch. Looks just like an AR-15. AR-15 is the semi-automatic. It's been unlawful for civilians to own automatic weapons since the 30s. You couldn't get an M16 now. The AR-15, because it looks exactly like an M16, appeals to both lunatics and the people that are trying to tell you that it's an automatic weapon. The difference between automatic and semi-automatic is semi-automatic goes off every time you pull the trigger. You don't have to throw a bolt, you don't have to pump it or anything like that. Bing, 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 bing. Fully automatic, you just pull that trigger once. Gun legislation over the last 20 years has done virtually nothing to curb the violence problems that really haunted this nation. It has solved some, but it never has solved the problems that was set out to solve. They all come after there's been a mass shooting someplace and hysteria reigns. It should also be noted that if suicides, gang-related shootings, and police shootings are subtracted from violent gun death figures, the figures have gone down for the last 25 years. There are very strong arguments on both sides of guns, obviously, and there's smoke and mirrors going on both sides. Being a professional reporter, I have to see both sides. And I do, and I agree with both sides. There's an awful lot out there that is all covered up and really doesn't come up to, doesn't work, all right? It's my contention that the root of firearms violence in the U.S. today is the inadequate storage of private firearms and the inadequate administration of the federal background check. I tell my classes, you have a moral and legal obligation, excuse me, moral and legal obligation to store those guns so only you can get to them. Store your ammunition someplace else, store the guns under lock and key so only you can get to them. Only the person qualified to use that gun. 90% of the mass shootings are somebody that took somebody else's gun. They're lunatics. They're not allowed to have guns legally, but they got those guns. All right, now we'll let McKellen tell the fun stuff.